The Middle East is once again entering a period of dangerous uncertainty. Tensions involving Iran and Israel have intensified to a level that cannot be ignored. While hostility between these two states has existed for decades, the current escalation feels different. The language is sharper, the military signaling is stronger, and the margin for miscalculation is becoming thinner. And if a large-scale strike on Iran either continues or expands, especially with possible support or coordination from the United States, the consequences would not remain limited to one battlefield. Modern conflicts do not operate in isolation, they ripple outward. The first impact would naturally be inside Iran. Strategic sites, military installations, or nuclear-related facilities could become targets. However, history shows that even precision operations carry risks. Civilian infrastructure can be damaged directly or indirectly. In any escalation scenario, the humanitarian dimension becomes central. Civilian casualties, displacement, and infrastructure disruption change the political temperature across the entire region. Iran possesses significant retaliatory capability. Its missile systems, drone programs, and regional alliances provide it with options beyond conventional defense. A response could come in different forms: direct missile exchanges, cyber operations, or indirect actions through aligned groups across the region. This is where escalation becomes complex, because retaliation does not always mirror the initial strike. It expands unpredictably. For Israel, any prolonged confrontation increases domestic security pressure. Missile defense systems can intercept threats, but sustained exchanges test endurance. Civilian populations become anxious, economic activity slows, investor confidence weakens. For the United States, involvement in a broader confrontation presents strategic and political risks. Increased military deployment would require financial commitment and diplomatic navigation. Washington would need to balance deterrence with the risk of deeper entanglement in a volatile region. At the same time, global partners would expect restraint to prevent energy market disruption. And that brings us to the most critical global variable: oil. Nearly 1/5 of the world's petroleum supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is one of the most strategically sensitive corridors on the planet. Even the perception of instability in this area is enough to push crude oil prices upward. Markets react not only to actual disruption, but to the fear of disruption. If shipping traffic slows, insurance premiums for tankers rise, or military presence increases, oil prices could spike significantly. And when oil rises, as everything else follows, fuel becomes more expensive, transportation costs increase, electricity generation becomes costlier in many economies, food distribution chains feel pressure, inflation accelerates, financial markets respond almost instantly. Emerging markets feel the shock first, because they are more dependent on energy imports and foreign capital flows. Now let us focus carefully on India. India imports more than 80% of its crude oil requirements. That means any sustained increase in global oil prices directly impacts the Indian economy. Higher crude prices translate into higher petrol and diesel prices domestically. Transport costs rise, manufacturing costs increase, inflationary pressure builds. The Reserve Bank of India could face policy challenges if inflation rises sharply. Higher import bills also put pressure on the Indian rupee. A weakening currency increases the cost of imports further, creating a cycle of economic strain. Another major dimension is the Indian diaspora in the Gulf region. Millions of Indian nationals live and work across Middle Eastern countries. Their remittances contribute significantly to India's foreign exchange reserves. If regional instability spreads, employment conditions could tighten. In extreme scenarios, evacuation planning might become necessary. Even without evacuation, uncertainty affects worker confidence and economic flow. Diplomatically, India occupies a delicate position. Israel is a key defense partner for India, particularly in technology and military cooperation. Iran, on the other hand, holds strategic importance for energy security and regional connectivity initiatives. Maintaining balanced relations in times of crisis requires careful messaging and strategic neutrality. India's likely approach would be to emphasize de-escalation, support diplomatic dialogue, and avoid public alignment with any military escalation. This balancing act is not simple. It requires quiet diplomacy and strategic calculation. Looking at broader regional implications, there are three realistic trajectories. The first is controlled escalation, limited exchanges followed by diplomatic back-channel efforts that prevent wider war. This scenario would still cause temporary market shocks, but could stabilize within weeks. The second is regional spillover, involvement of additional actors, maritime incidents, cyber warfare, and sustained energy volatility. And this would significantly increase economic risks globally and prolong uncertainty. The third is international mediation, where major global powers intervene diplomatically to prevent a prolonged crisis, especially to protect energy routes and global markets. A full-scale global war remains unlikely because economic interdependence acts as a deterrent. Major economies cannot afford sustained energy disruption. However, crises often escalate not by design but by miscalculation. One missile interception failure, one misidentified target, one accidental casualty event. Any of these can shift the trajectory. It is also important to recognize the information dimension of modern conflict. Narratives spread rapidly, social media amplifies emotion. In high-tension periods, misinformation can intensify reactions before facts are verified. Responsible analysis requires patience and verification. From a purely strategic perspective, the biggest risks for India are economic rather than military. Inflation, currency pressure, trade imbalances, and diaspora vulnerability represent the core concerns. At the same time, crises can reinforce the importance of energy diversification. India has been working toward expanding renewable capacity and diversifying oil suppliers. A prolonged Middle Eastern crisis could accelerate those strategic transitions. Globally, this situation is a reminder that geopolitical flashpoints remain deeply connected to economic stability. War in the Middle East is never confined to borders. It affects commodity prices in Asia, stock markets in Europe, and diplomatic conversations in North America. As observers, it is important to avoid oversimplification. This is not a binary story of good versus bad. It is a layered geopolitical competition shaped by security concerns, deterrent strategies, alliances, and domestic political calculations. The coming weeks will determine whether this escalation stabilizes or intensifies. Markets will watch energy flows, governments will monitor military movements, diplomats will work behind the scenes. For India, preparedness and strategic neutrality will be essential. Monitoring oil reserves, managing inflation expectations, ensuring diaspora safety, and maintaining diplomatic balance will define its response. The situation remains fluid. Risks are real, but outcomes are not predetermined. Escalation is possible. So is restraint. History shows that conflicts in this region often reach moments of extreme tension before diplomacy pulls them back from the edge. Whether that pattern repeats depends on leadership decisions in the days ahead. What is certain is this: in an interconnected world, no nation is truly distant from geopolitical shocks. The economic aftershocks travel faster than missiles. And in moments like these, stability depends less on rhetoric and more on calculation. The world is watching carefully, and so should we.